Have you ever found yourself in the depths of despair, questioning whether the trials you face are worth enduring? Perhaps you've been knocked down by life so many times that rising again feels like an impossible feat. But what if I told you that your pain has a purpose? That the tears you've shed, the nights you spent pleading in prayer, and the seasons of waiting are not in vain? What if I told you that restoration is not only possible, but is a promise? The God who formed you, who called you by name, has not abandoned you in your troubles. He is preparing something greater, something beyond your understanding. Stay with me as we uncover how God transforms trouble into triumph, turning your mourning into dancing. When you walk with God, nothing is wasted, not your struggles, your pain, nor your setbacks. The Creator of the universe sees every tear, hears every cry, and understands every unspoken word of anguish. His word assures us that He works all things together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. Yet, in the midst of trouble, it's easy to lose sight of this promise. It's easy to wonder why the God of abundance allows His children to experience lack, loss, and heartache. But the truth is that every season of difficulty is a divine setup for restoration, a restoration so profound it will overshadow the suffering that preceded it. In the book of Job, we find a man who lost everything: his wealth, his health, and even his children. His friends questioned his integrity, his wife doubted his faith, and his life seemed to spiral into chaos. Yet Job refused to curse God. He held on to his faith even when the world around him crumbled. And what did God do? He restored Job's life, giving him double what he had lost. This isn't just a story of ancient history, it's a revelation of God's nature. He is the God of restoration, and His restoration often exceeds what was lost. He doesn't merely replace what was taken, He multiplies it. Your trouble is not the end of your story. Trouble is often the soil in which God plants the seeds of your greatest blessings. But here's the key: those seeds require faith to grow. Faith is the bridge between your current troubles and the restoration God has promised. It's not enough to simply endure. You must believe that God is working behind the scenes. Your faith must declare, this trouble is temporary, but God's promises are eternal. I may have lost much, but my God is a restorer, and what He restores will be greater than what I had before. God's timing is perfect, even when it feels delayed. The Bible reminds us in Ecclesiastes that there is a time for everything, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. If you're in a season of weeping, know that laughter is on the horizon. If you're in a season of loss, know that restoration is coming. But God often allows us to linger in seasons of trouble to refine us, to build character, and to prepare us for the abundance He is about to release. He doesn't just restore possessions, He restores purpose, relationships, and identity. When Israel was taken captive in Babylon, it seemed like their story was over. Their homeland was destroyed, their people scattered, and their hope extinguished. Yet God spoke through the prophet Jeremiah, declaring, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future even in captivity." God had a plan for restoration. And when He brought them back to their land, He didn't just return them to their former state, He elevated them. He made them a testimony to His power and faithfulness. Perhaps you face betrayals, failures, or losses that have left you feeling unworthy of restoration. But let me remind you, restoration is not based on your worthiness, it's based on God's faithfulness. The prodigal son squandered everything. Yet when he returned to his father, he was not only welcomed but celebrated. His father didn't just forgive him, He restored him. This is the heart of God. He doesn't hold your mistakes against you. Instead, He uses them to display His mercy and grace. God's restoration often comes in unexpected ways. It may not look like what you had envisioned, but it will always be better than what you imagined. Think of Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his own brothers. For years, he lived in obscurity and suffering. But when God's time came, Joseph was elevated to a position of power, not just for his benefit, but for the salvation of many. Your trouble may seem senseless now, but in God's hands, it is a tool for His glory and your good. God doesn't just restore what was taken, He adds His divine favor to it. When the Israelites left Egypt, they didn't leave empty-handed. They carried the wealth of their oppressors. This is what God does. He takes what was meant to harm you and uses it to bless you. The same hands that enslaved you will be the hands that release the treasures God has stored up for you. But you must trust Him through the process. You must believe that even in your trouble, He is working to fulfill His promises. In the Gospel of John, Jesus said, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. This fullness doesn't mean a life free of trouble. It means a life where trouble is transformed into triumph. It means living with the assurance that no matter what the enemy steals, God will restore it, and not just restore it, but double it. This is the abundant life Jesus spoke of, a life where God's goodness outweighs the hardships, where His blessings outshine the losses, and where His glory is revealed through your story. The journey to restoration requires patience and perseverance. It requires trusting God when the evidence of His promises is not yet visible. But rest assured, the God who began a good work in you will carry it to completion. Your trouble is not a sign of God's absence. It is a setup for His presence to be made manifest in your life. The same God who turned water into wine, who fed thousands with a few loaves and fish, and who raised Lazarus from the dead is the God who will restore what you've lost. Keep your faith alive, for the story isn't over. Stay steadfast in prayer, for your cries have reached the heavens. And when restoration comes, and it will be a testimony not just to you, but to everyone around you of God's unfailing love and power. Let this be your declaration: though I have faced trouble, I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. My God is a restorer, and He will make all things new. Your trouble has never been a surprise to God. He knew every trial you would face, every battle you would fight, and every moment when you would feel like giving up. And yet, He also knew how He would deliver you. His plans for restoration were written long before the trouble arrived. God's process is not reactive, it is proactive. Before the foundation of the world, He prepared a way for your victory. He designed seasons of testing to strengthen your faith, not to destroy it. The very areas of your life that seem broken beyond repair are the places where His glory will shine brightest. When you walk with God, He gives you glimpses of His promises, but He doesn't always show you the process. The process often involves seasons of pruning, where He removes what no longer serves His purpose in your life. It may feel painful and confusing, but it's necessary for the restoration He has planned. Pruning prepares you to bear more fruit. It strips away distractions, impurities, and anything that might hinder you from stepping into the fullness of His blessing. Every loss, every setback, and every disappointment is a step closer to the restoration God has ordained. You may feel like you've been forgotten in the wilderness, but the wilderness is a place of preparation. It's where God refines your character, teaches you dependence on Him, and aligns your heart with His will. Think of the Israelites wandering in the desert for 40 years. It wasn't a punishment, but a preparation for the promised land. God was teaching them to trust Him, to rely on His provision, and to understand that His timing is perfect. In the same way, your wilderness season is not a sign of abandonment, it's a sign of preparation. The longer the process, the greater the blessing on the other side. Restoration requires faith that defies logic. Faith doesn't deny the reality of your trouble, it declares the greater reality of God's promises. It says, I may be pressed on every side, but I am not crushed. I may be struck down, but I am not destroyed. Faith sees beyond the immediate pain to the eternal purpose. It holds on to hope when everything around you seems hopeless. It believes that the same God who parted the Red Sea can make a way for you, even when there seems to be no way. God's restoration often begins in the unseen places of your heart. Before He restores your circumstances, He restores your spirit. He heals the wounds that no one else can see. He removes bitterness, fear, and doubt, replacing them with peace, joy, and faith. This inner restoration is the foundation for everything else He wants to do in your life. A restored heart leads to a restored life. When you allow God to heal you from the inside out, you position yourself to receive the fullness of His blessing. The enemy wants you to believe that your trouble is permanent, but God declares that it is temporary. Trouble may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. The night may feel long and dark, but morning always comes. God's light always breaks through the darkness, and when it does, it not only illuminates your path, but also reveals the purpose behind your pain. What the enemy meant for evil, God will use for good. Your trouble will become your testimony, and your pain will become your platform to declare His goodness. In moments of trouble, it's easy to isolate yourself, but God calls you to draw closer to Him. He invites you into His presence, where there is fullness of joy and peace that surpasses all understanding. Worship becomes your weapon in the battle. Praise confuses the enemy and shifts your focus from your problems to God's promises. When you worship in the midst of trouble, you declare that God is greater than your circumstances. You remind yourself in the spiritual realm that your trust is in Him alone. God often uses people as instruments of His restoration. He places divine connections in your life to encourage, uplift, and guide you. But He also removes relationships that are not aligned with His purpose for you. It can be painful to lose connections, but trust that God's pruning is for your good. He is making room for the right people to enter your life, those who will walk with you into the season of restoration. Be open to His leading and don't cling to what He is asking you to release. When restoration begins, it often comes in ways you don't expect. God's ways are higher than ours, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. What seems like a setback may actually be a setup for something greater. And trust His process, even when it doesn't make sense. Remember that God doesn't work according to human logic. He operates in the supernatural. He takes the weak and makes them strong. He takes the broken and makes them whole. He takes what was lost and turns it into something far greater than you could have imagined. The Word of God is filled with promises of restoration. And those promises are as true today as they were when they were written. In Joel, God declares, "I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten." Think about that for a moment. God doesn't just restore things, He restores time. He redeems the seasons that feel wasted, the opportunities that seemed lost, and the moments you thought could never be recovered. He is not bound by time, and His restoration transcends human limitations. Your role in this journey is to remain steadfast in faith and obedience. Trust in God's character, even when His methods are unclear. Lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. Obedience positions you for restoration. It aligns you with God's will and opens the door for His blessings to flow into your life. Even when it's difficult, choose to obey. Even when it costs you something, choose to trust. God honors obedience, and He rewards those who diligently seek Him. As you wait for restoration, guard your heart against discouragement. The enemy will try to plant seeds of doubt, fear, and despair, but resist him with the truth of God's word. Meditate on His promises and speak them over your life. Declare that you are more than a conqueror through Christ. Proclaim that no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Remind yourself daily that God is faithful, and He will fulfill every promise He has made to you. Restoration often comes in stages. It may not happen all at once, but don't despise small beginnings. Celebrate every step forward, every sign of progress, and every indication that God is at work. Each step is a reminder that He has not forgotten you. He is faithful to complete what He has started. Keep pressing forward, knowing that your restoration is on the horizon. The same God who began the good work in you will carry it to completion. God's restoration is not just about you, it's about His glory being revealed through you. When He restores you, it becomes a testimony to others of His power and faithfulness. Your story of redemption will inspire others to trust Him in their own trials. Your life will become a beacon of hope, pointing people to the God who restores, redeems, and renews. This is the ultimate purpose of restoration, not just to bless you, but to glorify Him. Hold on to this truth: God is not done with you yet. The trouble you faced is not the end of your story. The God who parted the seas, who raised the dead, and who fed the multitudes is the same God who is working in your life right now. Trust Him. Believe in His promises. And know that restoration is not just possible, it is certain, for He is faithful to His word. Your trouble will not have the final say. God will. And His word declares that He will restore, redeem, and renew all things. The restoration of God always carries a deeper purpose than simply fixing what has been broken. His work in your life is never random or superficial. It is profound and transformative. What God is doing is far more than just putting the pieces back together. He is creating something new, something stronger, something better than you could have imagined. His restoration does not simply return you to where you were. It elevates you to a place that reflects His glory more fully. The trials you've endured are not wasted. They are the raw materials that God uses to craft His masterpiece in your life. In the moments when restoration seems delayed, know that God's timing is deliberate. His plans are not hurried, nor are they hindered by earthly circumstances. What feels like a delay to you is in fact a preparation for something extraordinary. God does not withhold His blessings to frustrate you. He withholds them to ensure that you are fully ready to receive and sustain them. Sometimes the weight of the blessing requires a strength that can only be built through waiting. It is in the waiting that your character is refined, your faith is deepened, and your spirit is strengthened. God is not only concerned with what He gives to you, but also with what He creates in you. Restoration is as much about who you are becoming as it is about what you are receiving. The lessons learned in seasons of trial become the foundation for the wisdom, resilience, and grace you will carry into your next season. The humility cultivated in the valley becomes the platform for the gratitude you express on the mountaintop. Every step of the journey is intentional, designed by God to mold you into the person He has called you to be. When God restores, He often does so in ways that confound human understanding. His ways are not our ways, and His thoughts are higher than ours. What may appear to be a detour is actually a direct path to His purpose. What may seem like loss is often the precursor to gain. The Apostle Paul reminds us in Romans 8:28 that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. This promise is not conditional on your ability to understand how things will unfold. It is rooted in God's unchanging character and faithfulness. The enemy will attempt to use your trouble to define you, to convince you that you are nothing more than your failures, losses, or pain. But God sees you through the lens of His purpose, not your circumstances. He calls you by your destiny, not your history. In Isaiah 43:1, God declares, "Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine." This assurance reminds you that you are not abandoned in your trouble. You are claimed, cherished, and chosen. Your identity is not in what you've been through, but in who God says you are. Restoration requires you to release control and surrender to God's plan. Surrender is not a sign of weakness, it is an act of trust. It says, "God, I may not understand what you're doing, but I believe that your plan is perfect." Surrender allows God to take the burden of figuring it all out and replaces it with the peace of trusting Him. This act of surrender is not passive, it is active faith in motion. It positions you to receive His restoration, knowing that His hands are far more capable than yours. God's restoration often begins with a promise. Throughout the Bible, God made promises to His people before they ever saw the fulfillment of them. To Abraham, He promised descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, even when Abraham had no children. To Joseph, He gave dreams of leadership, even when Joseph was in a pit and later in prison. To David, He anointed him as king while he was still a shepherd boy. These promises were not immediate in their fulfillment, but they were certain. In the same way, God has spoken promises over your life, and He is faithful to fulfill every one of them in His perfect time. In the process of restoration, there may be moments of doubt and discouragement. The enemy will whisper lies that God has forgotten you or that your trouble is too great for Him to handle. In those moments, remember that God is bigger than your trouble. He is the creator of the universe, the one who holds all things together. There is no obstacle too great, no situation too complex, and no heart too broken for Him to restore. His power is made perfect in your weakness, and His grace is sufficient for every need. As God restores you, He also equips you to walk in a new level of authority and purpose. The trials you face become the training ground for the calling He has placed on your life. Just as David's experience as a shepherd prepared him to face Goliath, your experiences are preparing you for the battles ahead. God uses what the enemy meant for harm to equip you with strength, wisdom, and courage. He is not only restoring what was lost, He is preparing you to steward the blessings that are coming. Your response to God's restoration is crucial. Will you choose gratitude over entitlement? Will you choose obedience over complacency? Restoration is not just about receiving, it's about responding. When God restores you, He invites you to participate in His work by walking in faith, sharing your testimony, and using what you've received to bless others. Your restoration is not an end in itself, it is a means to glorify God and advance His kingdom. It is a reminder that His plans for you are good, His love for you is unwavering, and His purposes for you are eternal. God's restoration often includes the people around you. Just as He restored Job and gave him twice as much as he had before, He also restored Job's relationships and community. God's blessings are not meant to be kept to yourself, they are meant to overflow into the lives of others. Your restoration is an opportunity to demonstrate God's goodness and to be a vessel of His love. As you are restored, you become a testimony of His faithfulness, a living example of His power to redeem and renew. The journey of restoration requires patience, perseverance, and prayer. It is not always easy, but it is always worth it. Every prayer you pray, every step of faith you take, and every moment you choose to trust God brings you closer to the fulfillment of His promises. Prayer is not just about asking for restoration, it is about aligning your heart with God's will. It is about seeking His presence, listening to His voice, and trusting His guidance. Through prayer, you invite God into every aspect of your journey, and you position yourself to experience His power in profound ways. As you continue to walk this journey, remember that God is for you. He is your advocate, your protector, and your provider. He is the one who goes before you, making a way where there seems to be no way. He is the one who fights for you, who surrounds you with His favor, and who upholds you with His righteous right hand. No matter how great the trouble, His grace is greater. No matter how deep the pain, His love is deeper. And no matter how far you feel you've fallen, His hand is always there to lift you up and restore you. God's restoration is not only a reflection of His power, but a demonstration of His love. He does not restore out of obligation or duty, He restores because He delights in seeing His children walk in the fullness of His blessings. Restoration is deeply personal, tailored to the unique needs and purposes of your life. It is not a one-size-fits-all process, but a meticulous and intentional work that only God in His infinite wisdom can accomplish. Every detail of your restoration speaks of His intimate knowledge of you, His deep care for you, and His unwavering commitment to you. As you walk through the process, you may notice that God's restoration sometimes begins with a stripping away. It may seem counterintuitive, but before He builds something new, He often removes the old. This can be painful, as it may involve letting go of things you once held dear or stepping away from places of comfort. However, this pruning is necessary to make room for the greater things He has in store. Just as a gardener prunes a vine to ensure its growth and fruitfulness, God prunes areas of your life that no longer serve His purpose, clearing the way for His abundance to flow. During this time, trust is essential. Trust that God's plans are always for your good, even when they challenge your understanding. Trust that His timing is perfect, even when it feels like you've waited too long. Trust that He sees what you cannot, and He is orchestrating everything according to His divine plan. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. This trust is not blind, it is rooted in the evidence of His faithfulness throughout your life and in His word. In the process of restoration, it is important to guard your heart and mind. The enemy will attempt to sow seeds of doubt, fear, and discouragement. He will try to convince you that restoration is not possible or that you are unworthy of it. but you must stand firm in the truth of God's promises. Equip yourself with His word, which is the sword of the Spirit, and speak His truth over your life. Declare that you are a child of God, redeemed by His grace and destined for His glory. Let His truth drown out every lie and fortify your faith. God's restoration often brings a ripple effect, touching areas of your life you didn't even realize were broken. His work is holistic, addressing not just the outward circumstances, but also the inner wounds, fears, and doubts that have lingered in your heart. He restores your joy, your peace, and your confidence in His goodness. He restores your hope, reminding you that the best is yet to come. His restoration is comprehensive, leaving no area untouched, no wound unhealed, and no promise unfulfilled. Even as you receive God's restoration, He is calling you to a higher level of faith and obedience. Restoration is not the end of your journey, it is the foundation for a new chapter. God is preparing you to walk in greater purpose, to influence others for His kingdom, and to steward His blessings with wisdom and humility. What He restores in your life is not just for your benefit, it is for His glory and for the blessing of those around you. Your story of restoration becomes a testimony of His grace, inspiring others to trust Him and seek His power in their own lives. Every step of the restoration process is an invitation to deepen your relationship with God. It is an opportunity to experience His love in a new way, to witness His power firsthand, and to draw closer to His heart. Through the trials, the waiting, and the ultimate restoration, God is revealing Himself to you in ways that will forever change you. He is showing you that His love is relentless, His promises are true, and His plans for you are greater than you could ever imagine. God's work of restoration is always unfolding, even in moments when it seems like nothing is happening. His ways are higher than ours, His methods are beyond our understanding, and His timing is always perfect. While you wait for His promises to manifest, He is not idle. He is working behind the scenes, orchestrating events, aligning circumstances, and preparing your heart for what is to come. The waiting itself is not wasted. It is a vital part of the process where God teaches, refines, and strengthens you for the blessings He is preparing. In the waiting, God calls you to remain steadfast in faith. Faith is not passive. It is an active trust that declares, even in the absence of visible results, that God is faithful. This kind of faith moves mountains, parts seas, and calls forth life from the dead. It declares with unwavering confidence that what God has spoken will come to pass, no matter how impossible it seems. Hebrews 11:1 reminds us, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This assurance becomes the anchor for your soul, holding you steady in the storms of life. God's restoration is often marked by moments of divine favor and breakthrough. These moments are not random, they are signs of His hand at work. They remind you that He is present and that His promises are unfolding in your life. These breakthroughs may come in unexpected ways or through unlikely sources, but they are always perfectly timed. They remind you that God's resources are limitless and that He can use anything or anyone to fulfill His purposes. Be ready to recognize and celebrate these moments, for they are evidence of His faithfulness. In the process of restoration, God may also bring you into new relationships or reconnect you with people from your past who will play a role in His plan. He often uses others to bless, encourage, and guide you. Be discerning about the people He places in your life and seek His wisdom in building these connections. At the same time, be willing to let go of relationships that hinder His work in you. Not everyone can go with you into the next season of your life, and God may lovingly remove those who are not aligned with His purpose for you. Your obedience to God's instructions is crucial during this time. Restoration is not only about receiving from God, but also about walking in alignment with His will. He may ask you to take steps of faith, make sacrifices, or step out of your comfort zone. These acts of obedience demonstrate your trust in Him and prepare you to handle the blessings He is about to release. They show that you value His will above your own desires and that you are willing to follow Him wherever He leads. As God restores you, He also equips you with a renewed sense of purpose. Restoration is never just about returning to where you were. It is about stepping into a new season of greater impact and influence. God uses the trials you've endured and the lessons you've learned to prepare you for the assignments He has ahead. He takes what the enemy meant for harm and turns it into a powerful testimony of His grace and power. Your story of restoration becomes a beacon of hope for others, a testament to what God can do for those who trust Him. God's restoration often exceeds your expectations. Ephesians 3:20 tells us that He is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us. His blessings are abundant, overflowing, and beyond comprehension. When He restores, He doesn't just give back what was lost, He multiplies it. This principle is seen throughout Scripture, from Job's double portion to Joseph's rise to power after years of suffering. God's restoration is always greater than the loss, not because of anything we deserve, but because of His incredible grace. In the midst of restoration, it is important to cultivate a heart of gratitude. Gratitude shifts your focus from what is missing to what God is doing. It acknowledges His goodness and faithfulness even when the process is not yet complete. Gratitude keeps your heart aligned with His and opens the door for even greater blessings. As 1 Thessalonians 5:18 instructs, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. A grateful heart is a joyful heart, and joy becomes your strength as you continue to trust in His promises. God's restoration brings healing not only to your circumstances, but also to your soul. It addresses the wounds of the past, the disappointments, and the fears that have held you back. He binds up the brokenhearted and sets the captives free, as Isaiah 61:1 declares. This healing is deep, transformative, and liberating. It allows you to move forward without the weight of the past, to dream again, and to embrace the future with hope. God's healing is a reminder that nothing is beyond His power to redeem and restore. As you embrace God's restoration, remember that it is a journey, not a one-time event. It unfolds over time as He continues to work in and through you. Each step brings you closer to His ultimate purpose, and each victory is a reminder of His faithfulness. Be patient with the process and with yourself, trusting that God's timing is perfect. Celebrate the small victories along the way, for they are stepping stones to the greater work He is doing. God's restoration ultimately points to His glory. It is a demonstration of His character, His love, and His power. It reveals His heart for His children and His desire to see them walk in the fullness of His blessings. As you experience His restoration, let your life be a reflection of His goodness. Let your testimony inspire others to seek Him, to trust Him, and to believe in His promises. God's restoration is not just about you, it is about His kingdom, His purposes, and His glory. As you continue to walk in the journey of restoration, there are moments where you may feel as if the process is taking longer than expected. It is during these times that God is shaping your character, fortifying your spirit, and deepening your faith. The waiting period is not an empty space, it is an intentional time where God is making you ready for the level of blessing and responsibility He is preparing you for. Each challenge, each delay, and each unanswered prayer is an opportunity for you to grow in trust and reliance on Him. Your faith will be tested, but it will also be refined, much like gold is purified in fire. God never wastes a moment of our lives. Everything you have gone through, the pain, the disappointment, the heartache, has not been in vain. He uses it all to prepare you for the destiny He has called you to. What may have seemed like a setback in your life is often the very thing that positions you for a comeback. God's restoration is not about simply fixing what was broken. It is about building something stronger, greater, and more beautiful than before. It is about refining you so that you can handle the magnitude of the blessings He desires to pour into your life. Remember that restoration is not just about receiving material things, but about the renewal of your heart, mind, and spirit. The external blessings are simply a reflection of the inward transformation that is taking place. When God restores, He does more than give you back what you lost. He elevates you to a new level of understanding, purpose, and intimacy with Him. This is why the waiting can feel intense. It is in this time that He is making you ready to steward the greater things He has in store. It's not just about what you will receive, but about who you will become. When God restores, He does it in a way that brings glory to His name. You will look back on your life and be amazed at how He has worked all things together for your good. There will be moments of reflection when you will see the intricate way He has woven together the details of your life, and you will marvel at His wisdom and grace. His restoration is always perfect. It is in His perfect will and His perfect timing. What you might have thought was a wasted year, a lost season, or an irreparable failure, He turns into a divine testimony of His power to restore. As you stand on the threshold of your restoration, know that the process is not meant to discourage you, but to empower you. God is preparing you for a life that is rich in His presence, overflowing with His joy, and marked by His blessings. Every part of your story, every struggle, and every triumph has been part of His divine plan to shape you into the person He has called you to be. Don't look at your current situation with the eyes of despair, but with the eyes of faith, trusting that He is doing a mighty work in you. In this season, hold tightly to the truth that God's promises are yes and amen. Whatever He has spoken over your life, He will bring to pass. Your restoration is not a distant dream, it is a reality that is unfolding before your very eyes. The key is to continue trusting in His plan, even when the journey seems long or unclear. Every step you take in faith brings you closer to the fullness of the restoration He has promised. So stand firm, keep your eyes fixed on Him, and know that His love for you is unwavering. As you walk in faith, hold on to the assurance that God will indeed restore double for your trouble. Not because you deserve it, but because His grace is greater than any loss or pain you have faced. You are being restored to a place of strength, of purpose, and of overflowing blessing. Let this truth take root deep in your heart, for God is faithful to do what He has promised. His restoration is unstoppable, and it will carry you into a future beyond what you can imagine. As we come to the conclusion of this message, I want to remind you that God's restoration is not just a future hope, it is a present reality. Whatever you have lost, whatever you have suffered, whatever you have gone through, know that God is working in your life to bring about a restoration that is greater than anything you can imagine. His timing is perfect, His plan is flawless, and His love for you is unwavering. In the midst of trials, remain steadfast in faith, knowing that God is preparing you for something greater. His promises are true, and His restoration will exceed your expectations. As you trust in Him, you will see His goodness unfold in your life, and He will restore double for your trouble. Hold on to that truth today, for your best